All right. Welcome to National Ag Week. We're really excited to celebrate agriculture across Nebraska today. Agriculture is one of the #1 industries in our state. It's the largest industry in our state. And if we took Nebraska and cut it into 100 pieces, about 92 of those pieces is used for farming and ranching and all of the jobs that involve agriculture across Nebraska. So today, I'm really excited to be here. My name is Brooke, and I work with Nebraska Agriculture in the classroom. And today we have Daniel and Camille here from Viterra, which is located right outside of Lexington, Nebraska. And they both work for the grain elevator there. And so they'll be able to share a little bit more about what they do and how they help farmers sell their corn globally across the world, which is so exciting. So to get started, when we talk about Nebraska, we have over 1 billion acres of corn. So that's about 1 billion football fields across Nebraska that we use for farming and growing those crops for us to eat. So in Nebraska, we rank number 3 in corn production. So we grow a lot of corn. Most of our corn grown in Nebraska is used to feed our livestock animals and to make fuel for our vehicles called ethanol. And then we get to use it for byproducts that we find every day, like toothpaste and lotion and all sorts of different things, even the chalk and the fireworks we like to use. All right. So when we think about Nebraska, we call Nebraska's corn the Golden Triangle. And the reason we do that, it's because we can add value to our state using corn, creating a biofuel, distillers grains for our cattle, and then the meat that we can consume. So that all happens within Nebraska, which provides an incredible economic engine for the state and for trade across the world. So that's kind of where Viterra comes in, because they help us market our grains to other places. So today we'll take questions as we go throughout. Feel free, if you have any questions, to type it in the chat box today. Otherwise, if you want to come up, raise your hand, we'll call on you and you guys can come up to the screen and we'll unmute and you guys can ask questions directly to Daniel and Camille. So Daniel and Camille, thank you so much for joining me today. Would you guys share a little bit about yourselves and kind of how you guys got started in agriculture?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to. Hi, everybody. My name's Daniel. I'm the manager here at Viterra Lexington. Really excited to be here with you today. So thanks for having us. Yeah, quick introduction on myself. So I actually grew up in Southern California. Most people think of that as sunshine and beaches. I actually grew up surrounded by agriculture. So growing up around production ag kind of led me to wanting to be in this industry long term. So when I moved to Montana when I was young, I decided to go to school there for agriculture business. And yeah, the rest kind of kicked off from there. So I've been in the industry now this is my 7th year. I've worked my way from merchandiser trainee, manager trainee to now running locations, both from Montana here to Nebraska. So thanks again for having us. And Camille?
Hi, my name is Camille. I'm a grain merchandiser trainee here at Viterra. I actually grew up in Northeast Nebraska in Clarkson. I grew up on a farm where we raised corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and cattle. So it's kind of all I've known my whole life. And I knew that when I was growing up, I wanted to stay in agriculture. And so I attended the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and I got a degree in ag business. And I kind of found my space out here in commodity trading. So
very good. So you both went to school. What kind of schooling helped you to have the job that you have today? What kind of classes did you take that are really important to help you and to be successful there at Viterra?
Absolutely. I'll tackle this one first and let Camille jump in too. So up at Montana State University, studying agricultural business, there was a heavy emphasis on economics, understanding how markets work, and then one of my favorite classes would be advanced agricultural marketing, which was a class where we practice trading markets like we do in real life here at the elevator. very hands-on and very real and applicable to what I do every day. Camille?
And being here in the state of Nebraska, students have a lot of access to 4-H and FFA. So those are huge ways to just be involved in agriculture and just start to learn about what all takes place and all the different kinds of careers that you can have in the industry.
Very good. Thank you. Before I have some pictures to share with you guys today too. But before we do that, agriculture, we said, is a big part of Nebraska, but farmers, we have to know a little bit more about how that corn gets to the grain elevator before we can learn more about global markets and trade. So corn here in Nebraska is planted in the springtime. And then, so like in the next couple of weeks here, in the next month or so, farmers are getting ready to plant their fields. That corn then will grow all summer long, and then come fall, we harvest our grains, and farmers have different choices that they can make with their corn that we grow here in Nebraska. So 99% of the corn grown in Nebraska is actually field corn. So if we take a look up here, can you guys all see this? This is our field corn. And sometimes we call it dent corn because it has all of these tiny, sorry, I know I'm trying to get this to focus here. There we go. Because it has all of these tiny little dents. It grows on a red cob. So that's kind of different than the other types of corn that we grow here. So we're growing it, and we use it to feed mostly to our livestock. We use it for fuel in our vehicles, to make cornstarch, corn oils, all sorts of different things there. Then we grow this kind of corn. This is white corn. We use it to make food grade products. So if we think about Cheetos, Doritos, corn pop cereal, corn flakes, we can use it to make tortilla shells, the food products that come from corn. So that usually comes from food grade yellow or food grade white corn. And then this really fun one that we have here is popcorn. And Nebraska is the #1 popcorn producer in all 50 states. So it grows on a cob just like all of the other types of corn we have here in Nebraska. And the other one is sweet corn. And I don't have one of those with me today because we usually get to enjoy that fresh in the late summer, right off the cob. So we grow 4 main types of corn, but the most common that we grow here in Nebraska is this field corn. And that's because we have a lot of cattle to feed. We also have a lot of byproducts and other things that we have to grow and to use. So corn is a really big part of Nebraska. And so we're celebrating that on our field trip today. So corn, after it's harvested, can be stored on the farm. So they store those in big grain bins. It could be taken straight to a feedlot or a feed yard to feed those livestock animals. It could be sold to an ethanol plant or taken to Viterra to be sold to the grain elevator. So this is where Daniel and Camille come in. They're able to share what kind of happens next. But I think what we're going to do, I'm going to show you a picture of kind of what that grain elevator looks like so we can get a visual in our head before we do that. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And for my friends that are on video, if you want to give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen, that would be great. Let's see here. Can you see my Viterra? Let's see. Okay, wonderful. So Viterra over here looks like this. So they have several different grain elevators across the United States. Do you guys have, is Viterra in other countries as well?
It is, yeah. We're fortunate enough to be part of a business that is actually worldwide. For North America here, we have US, Mexico, and Canada. And then we have locations all around the world serving different needs for different producers.
Okay. So here is another photo. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm having trouble sharing my screen. This is what the Lexington plant looks like. So can you kind of describe what we're seeing in these pictures today?
Yeah, absolutely. So here you're seeing, as Brooke said, the Lexington location. So here in Lexington, we boast a pretty good storage amount. We can hold just over 1.2 million bushels upright. And then we have a flat storage as well that we pile on the ground during harvest. harvest. So what we're seeing here in this picture, from left to right, is we have a couple 180,000 bushel bins on the left there where we can store preferably dry corn that's ready to move out onto rail or truck or other markets. There in the center of the picture, you see what appears to be a bunch of smaller bins, and that's what we would call our 6 or 8 pack. They're smaller bins, but they allow us to segregate based on condition of the grain, right? So sometimes it comes in a little wetter, a little drier, a little higher damage. So that allows us the ability to keep grain separate so we can meet very specific specifications on outbounds. Moving to the right there, we have a couple dryers that we utilize during harvest, and then the 2 steel bins completely on the right-hand side there. Those are, again, large bins, right around 200,000 bushel each. That allows us to, once we have grain in spec, we can move it over there and be ready to go. Front and center in the picture there, those yellowish colored sheds, if you will, those are our truck receiving pits. We have 2 of those here where we can keep trucks moving as quick as we can. That is where farmers would drive in with their large trucks to get unloaded.
So I think I have a picture of that next. I have the inside of it. Will you share? Will you share what happens here? This is the most important part of the process, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So this is the brains of the operation. You know, myself growing up, I kind of always thought of agriculture as very labor-intensive work, which it can be, but our industry is actually moving very heavily automated. So, you know, 20, 30 years ago, we would have to have guys going up and down ladders 10, 15 times a day to get stuff switched around, whereas now we have a control room. So this picture here shows our control screen where we can actually turn on and off and open bins for just about every spot in the elevator. We can run our dryers, we can run our legs, which actually carries the grain to the top of the elevator. This is where you can quite literally run the entire show from this one room by yourself if you needed to.
Very interesting. We'll take some questions here. Does anybody have any questions for Daniel and Camille? Otherwise, I can show you inside here. This is what those yellow sheds kind of look like that he was showing us at the beginning right here. And then the farmer, you said, drops their grain.
Yeah, so this picture here is, if we can go back one there, Brooke, I'll just quickly highlight that one. That is a farmer hauling into the elevator here, and we're dumping, that would be filled corn that you touched on very first, which Nebraska is number, I think you said number 3 for. So that is a great picture that we have of that's exactly what it looks like. Farmers come in and we're dumping it. It looks like a big hole in the ground, but then it goes to the top of the elevator.
So if we go back here, it gets dropped into the ground, and then you said it goes all the way up to
as we're watching this, please be quiet. If you're talking.
Oops, sorry. There we go. So we have these pictures here. And then after it gets delivered into the grain or to the bottom, and it goes all the way up to the top of those grain bins, where does it go from there? What's the next step? I guess let's go back to talk a little bit about, so you buy the grains or the corn, the other grains from farmers. So what type of corn are you buying from these farmers? Is it specific to like corn, white corn, field corn, popcorn? What kind of corn are you buying?
Yeah, so that's actually the really interesting thing about us here in Lexington, whereas a lot of locations can kind of only deal in 1 or 2 grains at a time. You know, typically it's your filled corn and soybeans. Us here in Lexington, we have the pleasure of purchasing and handling, you know, your filled corn, yellow corn, which is what we've been discussing here so far. We also do actually handle white corn, and we ship that all over the place for food grade. And then we do actually handle non-GMO yellow corn as well, which is a different class of filled corn that has a little bit of a special market to it, all in and of itself.
Yes. Are there any requirements as that farmer brings their grain to your elevator to sell? Are there any requirements that they must meet before they can deliver it to Viterra?
Yeah, great question. So there's quite a few specifications that must be met to make what we call grade. So just like the students have grades in class, the grain that we buy from farmers also have grades. It's not ABC, but it is 1 through 5, typically speaking. So we handle specifically number 2 yellow corn. The higher the number, the lower the grade would be on it. So we handle number 2 yellow corn, which is below, I believe, 3% damage, 2% foreign material. So, foreign material can be husks, dirt, stuff like that, other commodities. So there are quite a few grades on it that help it meet specs.
I was also thinking, when you're talking about a grade, does that have to do with the moisture content of a seed kernel that have, or I know you said you had a dryer there. So what does that kind of mean for the farmer? Because we have to kind of, before we harvest the grain, we have to let that corn kind of dry out a little bit too before we can harvest it from the field. But if we harvest it and it's still, and those kernels aren't dry enough, do you guys dry it there, or what does that process kind of look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Moisture plays a really big role in what we do here. So as you stated there, during harvest, we want it to dry down. Our ideal around harvest is around 16-17% moisture. We have to ship out 15.5 or below. So we will dry it to about 15% moisture. Farmers do have the option of hauling it in higher and sometimes up to say 24%, which is pretty wet for corn. It's going to be harder to store when it's wet. So we think about it like say bread. Dry bread can store for a long time, but if you get it wet, mushy, it's not gonna stay in your refrigerator or your cabinet very long. So that is a big part of what we're looking for is moisture. And if it does come in too high, especially at harvest time, we do have those 2 large dryers on site, which we just use heat air to cycle it through and take a few percentage points of moisture out of the corn before it goes into a bin for storage.
Okay. So the corn has moisture in it because that's kind of like, if we think about our sweet corn that we eat, it's nice and soft when we bite into it. This corn we're delivering is dried and kind of harder and crunchier. So we could take that kernel off, and the moisture content has to be below, you said 15% or around there. Give or take, depending on the specific type of corn they're delivering to the elevator. Do you guys buy other crops besides just corn, or do you guys focus on corn specifically at Viterra or at your location?
Yeah, so location specific, we handle corn and soybeans with multiple classes of corn. Those are our 2 biggest here. Viterra as a whole, we handle, goodness, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's just about every commodity, every crop you can imagine. Viterra as a company does handle, including, specific to Nebraska, wheat, corn, soybeans, and quite a few others.
Very good. Does anybody have any questions for Danielle and Camille? Does anybody have any corn questions or more questions about their jobs? If you have questions and want to come up, feel free. I'll call on your classroom. It looks like we have one from LeMay in 4th grade.
Okay. I have a question. Can they hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is, how do they really like put the seeds or something? What do they grow out of?
What do they grow? Like, where do they come from?
Yeah.
So farmers all across Nebraska, I think, are right, Daniel? They're growing corn, and when they harvest it from their fields, they get to decide where that corn goes. So it can either go to the farm, they can store it on their farm, or they have the option to sell it to Viterra, which is the grain elevator here. And let me show you this picture. If we go back here, this big elevator is where farmers take their corn. And then Viterra buys that corn from the farmer. And then they are going to tell us a little bit here in a moment where that corn goes after the farmer delivers it to the elevator, because they get to sell it all across the world, which is pretty amazing. All right. Are there any other questions?
Yes.
I think I see one. Faith Christian.
How does it get from the hole to the top?
Oh,
That is a great question. So actually on this picture that we're looking at right here is going to be our best one to kind of show you. So after it goes into that hole in the ground that we were talking about, there is a system of essentially it looks like buckets, big buckets on a belt that takes it to the top. And in this picture, it's kind of hard to see, but there's three what we call legs. So right in the center of the picture there's those the tallest structures. Those are what we call bucket elevators or legs. So that scoops it from the pit and takes it all the way to the top, and then it dumps the bucket into a spout, and gravity feeds into whichever bin we tell it we want it to go to from that control room. So great question.
that is a great question. So you were talking about these three columns right here, correct? As I was pointing to them. So that corn brings it up, and then you guys get to decide based on the computers in here where they go.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
So I have some other questions coming into the chat box over here, but we'll still take other questions too. So if your students want to come up to the front to be ready to answer or ask those questions, we can. We have one from St. Matthew in 4th grade. It says, why is the dust so dangerous? Is the dust dangerous?
That is a very good question. Yeah, so working in a grain elevator, one of the biggest things we have to do is make sure that we keep a clean environment, because the dust is actually combustible. So one of the largest threats to a grain elevator, just like most other places, would be, say a fire or something to that effect. So the grain dust is dangerous because it's combustible. So we don't want to have any open flame or any kind of source of ignition near that while we're dumping. The good news is we typically have ways to prevent that from harming ourselves as people when we're dumping, whether it be dust masks or just good dust systems, which we implement here in multiple elevators around the world as well to kind of control that dust. But yeah, grain dust is as a whole dangerous because it's combustible.
Very interesting there. All right, we have another question. I think I saw in Faith Christian. Go ahead. I see you standing up at the screen.
How many farmers do you think come to Viterra every year?
We deal with quite a few farmers across the U.S. We don't know for sure how many farmers, but probably about in our location, we deal with anywhere from 200 to 300 different farmers. So.
And they come back. Do they come back multiple times a year?
Yes. Yep. So they typically like to stay in our area. That way they don't have to pay as much to haul their grain somewhere else. So we usually get to see the same guys, which is nice to build relationships with the farmers.
Very interesting. So your farmers are coming back, but they haul grains in. So that kind of leads me to another question that I have on here. It says, on average, how much corn is sold each day?
It was with the hard question.
Or does it vary at all based on the day and the markets, which we're going to talk about here in a moment?
That it does, yeah. So I would say, there's some days where we're not getting a whole lot done. we're not buying or selling anything, and there's other days where the phones are going crazy and we're buying hundreds of thousands of bushels at a time. So I would say, a comfortable number would be somewhere around 10 million a year. 10 million bushel a year for corn.
Wow. Okay, I see one from Randolph. So I know you said your camera wasn't working, but feel free to unmute yourself if you would like to answer or ask a question today. And then we'll do St. Patrick, and then we're going to jump into the other portion, and then we'll wrap up with questions here in a moment. Randolph, go ahead. We can't hear you, Randolph. We're going to jump down. Let's jump down to St. Patrick. Go ahead and ask your question.
Do people get to the top of the last picture you showed us?
Oh, to the top of the elevator. Yeah. So we do have, you have to be trained in it. So we can't just go up there all the time. But we do have quite a few walkways and such up there. So we have, luckily here, we have an elevator within the elevator. We call it that takes you all the way to the top of the bin deck, which is the concrete there. And then from there, we've got ladder systems and walkways all over the top of that elevator. That's typically for maintenance and inventory management. So we can see what we got in those bins, confirm that the computer's doing good, taking the grain where we tell it to. So yeah, I would say on average, we probably have a person at the top of the elevator at least once a day.
Very good. And I'm sure safety is pretty important as you guys go up there. And I know I have some other photos I want to share here in a moment, but we're going to talk. So when the farmer delivers the corn to the grain elevator, they have different choices they can make on their farms, or that they make before they deliver it. So farmers, they have, was it 3 main options that they can choose when they sell their grain to you: pre-sell, spot sell, or delayed pricing. And so we call this, farmers, they kind of play the futures markets, which means they can't predict what the grain prices are going to be, but they have to do their best to predict whether that market price is going to go up or go down. And they often have those decisions to make before spring planting, during harvest, and then they have to determine when the best time it is to sell their grains. So Daniel, Camille, can you share what corn delivery options farmers have and maybe what each one of those mean to us or to a farmer?
Yeah. So farmers can pre-sell their crop to us, which is their new crop, which is the crop that they're going to be planting this spring that will harvest in the fall. And they do that because they like the price of corn right now. And so they're able to lock in that price and be able to deliver it in the fall and get paid for the price that they locked in today. And then spot sell is when the farmer brings the corn straight into the elevator that day. He says, I like the price of the market today. Go ahead and write me a check for whatever the futures market is doing that day. And then delayed price is typically bushels that farmers bring in during harvest that they didn't write a contract through their new crop corn. So they put it on delayed price, which allows them to wait and see what the futures market does. And then when they like a price that the futures market is giving, then they can price it then. But along with that delayed price, if they do that, then we have to charge them a storage cost and just because it costs money to keep the grain in our elevator.
Okay, so they get to bring it there and then they just don't sell it yet. So it's kind of like if they don't have the extra storage on their farms to keep that grain, you guys hold it for them.
Yep.
Very cool. So what do you see as like the most popular? Like, do farmers usually pre-sell? Do they spot sell? Or are they more likely to delay pricing? What do you think? Or is it kind of hit or miss?
I would say it's market dependent. Depending on where the prices are, every farmer has what they call a break-even price in mind, meaning they have to make at least this much money to stay profitable, to make money. So it depends on the market. If the market's up real high, like we've seen over the last year or so, the prices are really elevated. You get a lot of those forward contracts, those pre-sales, and some spot deliveries. And then if prices are low and you're not quite sure that you're going to be making a lot of money by selling it at that moment, you'll look for into that delayed price.
Perfect. So today we're talking a lot about the futures market and like the price of corn. So today you told me that the price of corn is about $6.55 per bushel, but that price changes every day. So farmers, they listen to that market report every day or in the mornings, over noon, and in the evenings to kind of see how it's changed to make those decisions. So does your elevator get to decide the price of corn, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we only decide a very small portion of that. Even that is more market-based. So there's two portions that go into making a cash price for the farmer. We've been talking a lot about futures here, which is the overall market. And then we have what we call a basis, which is the local market, if you will. You put those together, you get a cash price. So we have some say in what the basis is, but that is very indicative of what supply and demand of the local market is. So unfortunately, we don't control the price. I think our farmers would probably like us a lot more if we did, but we're just part of the market.
So when we think about like the cost per bushel, why does corn change in price? Why isn't it just a set price every day? And why does it change? What influences the change of corn prices?
Yeah, so the biggest driver there, I would say, would be supply and demand. We saw prices go really high this last year. I would contribute that to supply, being that we've had a pretty widespread drought. Without water, it's hard to grow crops. So therefore, there was less corn in the market. Lower supply is going to drive prices higher. So that would be the biggest driver for the market. Majority of the time would be supply and demand.
Okay. So we're going to kind of jump in. So after the farmer delivers the grain to the corn elevator, and it goes through the process like we saw in our photos, it gets unloaded, it goes into the big grain bins over there that you guys have. What happens next after you guys have that grain in your hands and you've already paid the farmer for their portion of the corn? What do you guys do after that?
Yeah, so much like a farmer, we have our decisions to make next too on whether we want to sell it or hold it, what we want to do with it. We here in Lexington, we're very fortunate to be surrounded by a great market, a local market. So we can help contribute, or we can help feed corn to feedlots and ethanol plants here. So we do quite a bit of that. And then we also serve as a link to the global market by loading onto rail cars. Let
me share that picture that you said. So you get to sell it to the global market. Let me make sure I'm sharing my right screen here. Okay. And then after it's been unloaded, it gets loaded into train cars.
Yeah, so being in Nebraska, I'm sure we've all seen the big long trains of grain cars going down the tracks. And this is exactly what they look like here at our facility. We load those train cars and they go all over the United States and in Canada and Mexico as well before being offloaded to go onto a boat if it's going to the rest of the world, or to an end user for, say, white corn grinding for tortilla chips.
Very cool. So so you guys get to make the decision. You guys get to sell it locally to feedlots, ethanol plants. You can sell it then globally. So you put it on these trains, they get shipped to the edge of the country, right? And then loaded onto big ships to be sold across the world. But how does global trade impact the cost of corn or the price? You kind of said supply and demand here, but who's buying our grain globally?
Yeah, great question. That brings us into the demand side of it. So we talked about the supply with needing water to grow crops, and likewise demand. So a big portion of that is supply in other countries to determine what country's crop is going to be the highest in demand. And right now we're talking a lot about China buying corn from the U.S. and this morning they just purchased another large shipment. So the demand for corn, that one's a little bit harder to explain just because there's a lot of factors that go into that. But I would say today's biggest driver for demand, the best example I can think of would be the pig population in China. The more pigs they have to feed, the more corn they're going to need. The less pigs they have, likewise, less corn they'll need to feed. So that would be an example that's relevant today, actually.
Great. So other countries need some of our grains like corn to feed the livestock animals that they're raising because they might not have the land or the space or the climate to grow the crops that we can grow right here in Nebraska. So if we talked about global trade here for a moment, is global trade important to us here in Nebraska?
Yes, it is. Because if we in Nebraska aren't able to get rid of all the corn that we have stored at our elevator, either to a feedlot or an ethanol plant, then we have the option to ship it elsewhere where there may be a shortage due to a drought or a war or anything else that is currently going on in the world.
Okay, thank you. We're going to wrap up with our few questions that we have left. I know we're really close on our time if we're not already. So if you guys have a couple more minutes to hang out with us, we're going to kind of wrap up with some questions with Daniel and Camille here, and we'll take any last questions that you have. And so overall, though, like the global markets are really important to farmers and ranchers because we buy and sell our grains based on supply and demand, especially Viterra, who helps kind of be that person who has farmers are able to sell their grain to them, and then they help in the assistance of getting it distributed other places, which is really cool. All right, let's take a question. I see my friend right here in St. Patrick's. Go ahead.
Do you guys get the same amount of grain in the winter as you do like in the late fall, or?
So we typically get a lot more grain around harvest time, which is when the farmer's out in the field actually hauling the crops, because some farmers don't have a lot of storage at their farm at home and they need somewhere to take that grain. And so they bring it into us. And then the farmers who do have storage at their farms are able to bring it in at a later date in March. But we usually see a lot more corn come in during October, November, and December.
Do you ever fill all of the grain bins all the way up?
Yeah, great question. We do. We are actually sitting in that situation right now where we've got room for about 10 more trucks and we're going to be full for another day or so. Yeah, quite often we try not to get completely full, but multiple times a year we do.
So I have a question kind of going off of that. You said those grain bins are full, the grain elevator. So do you contact the railroads to come and pick up the grain, or who gets to kind of make that decision? How does the trains know to come by and get grain from you?
Yeah, we have a very large team that we work with, and we have people on our team that are very, specifically trained in handling the rail markets. We kind of call them ahead of time and say, this is what we think is going to happen. So this is what we think we need for trains for the next couple months. And because we're such a large company, we can go out and say, we want 10 trains for the next 3 months, and we can kind of split those trains up amongst ourselves. So we do get to handle that through our team.
Okay, great. Did I see a student in LeMay? Did you guys have a question?
It was kind of just answered, but thank you.
Yes, sorry, I asked it. Let's go back. Was there a student in, let's see. I had another one though. It says, do you guys buy the crops or do you just grow the crops? And I think I could answer that one really quickly. You guys specifically buy the crops or the corn from farmers and ranchers there. Another question, it says, what do you do with the corn that has gone bad that isn't good for consumption or use?
That's something we definitely never want to have happen, but unfortunately it does. Worst case scenario is if it's so bad that we can't do anything with it, it gets spread back into a field as organic matter or hauled off, say for compost or something of the sort.
There we go. On average, how much corn is grown in Nebraska each year? We grow over 1 billion acres of corn across Nebraska, which is a lot of corn. We have a lot of land to grow plants and raise animals there. All right, let's take another one from St. Patrick. I see a student standing up there.
How much bushels do you grow for corn and soybeans?
They don't grow, they buy.
Oh, how much do you buy?
Yeah, so that will change year to year depending on supply, but I would say on average, right around 10 million bushels of corn and 2 million, 3 million bushels of soybeans. And just to kind of give a quick reference, 1 bushel is about a 5-gallon bucket.
Yep. It weighs about 56 pounds there. Okay, we have a couple more that I see here, and then we're going to wrap up. How did people find out that corn was good for animal feed? Do you guys want to take that one, or do you want me to?
If you've got a good answer, I'm gonna let you have that one.
I don't know the scientific way that they were found, but corn has a lot of carbohydrates in it, and it gives the animals energy to grow. So a lot of our beef cattle, they need proteins and energy. So corn even has some crude protein in it that is a great source of feed for our animals to get the nutrients that they need to grow. Just like we can eat corn as a food in our diet, we can feed it to our livestock animals as well. And then it says, who do you sell your corn to? Do you just want to tell us one more time, like kind of the different places that you can sell that corn to?
Yeah, so all the different places that we sell our corn to, it can either go to a feedlot, which is where the corn's going to be fed to the cattle, or it can go to an ethanol plant, or we can send it out on shuttles where to go to other parts of the world, where to go to different end users to be used for food products, or like the things that you had mentioned in the beginning, such as toothpaste, lotion, and things of that sort.
There we go. I'm filtering through a couple more here. Another question is, are there specific requirements to have the jobs that you guys have?
Yeah, so obviously growing up in an ag industry and with an ag background is helpful, but you don't necessarily need to grow up on a farm. I would say our main requirement is as long as you can get along with farmers and you can kind of understand how the market works, you can do pretty good in this industry.
Here we go. Another question from Mrs. Williamson's class. It said, what year to date was the best for you guys for growing corn? Do you guys remember? It says, what year was the best corn growing year to date?
That would be an interesting statistic to look up. I don't have that in front of me. I'm actually newer to this area of the country, so I don't have that in front of me right now.
I would say, would you say back, like for farmers, it was probably back in like 2012, like that era where the corn was really thriving and the markets were pretty hot for farmers to sell their grains, but it kind of fluctuates. It kind of feels like it goes up and then it goes down and then it goes up. So it really just depends on, like you said, the drought, the climate, the demand for other countries to buy our grain can influence the prices of grains. and kind of all of that we have there. Another question I think that we'll talk about really quickly, it says, when do farmers harvest? So farmers, they plant in the spring, so late April, early May. That corn grows all summer long, and then farmers will start to harvest in September, October, kind of, as we get closer to the winter months. And our final question we're going to take, it says, how close to Viterra are the farmers you buy located? Are they, how far do they drive to deliver corn to you guys?
Yeah, so it kind of varies. Some of our farmers, you know, it just depends on where their field's at or where their farm is located. So some farmers are only bringing their trucks in 2 miles, and then some of our farmers are bringing their trucks 30 miles. So it just all depends on where the farm is located.
Yes. Well, I just want to say thank you to all of the classrooms for joining us today to celebrate National Agriculture Week. We're really excited to have you all here. Agriculture is a big part of Nebraska and our daily lives. From the clothes we wear to the food that we eat, we use agriculture every single day. So I just want to say thank you again to Daniel and Camille from Viterra for coming out and taking time out of your guys' busy schedules to share a little bit more about corn harvest and the global markets and where corn has to go after it's harvested from the farmer's field. A lot of times we don't get to see that step in that process that corn takes afterwards. But I want to do a quick plug in for, I'm going to share my screen here one more time for all of my teachers that are on here. We have some great resources for classroom visits that tie into kind of our field trip today. So let me go ahead and share my screen one last time. If you guys go to our website, nefbfoundation.org/classroom visits, it's right under the Get Involved page right here. You click on that. It will bring up all of our classroom visit opportunities. So for 4th grade, we have a great one where we talk more about technology and farm to fuel. So you guys get to start the process of ethanol production and the fermentation process. For 5th grade classrooms, this one, it's called Competitive Farming. You guys actually get to play the futures market and buy and sell grain and pretend like you guys were selling corn to Viterra today. So it's kind of fun that we can use those types of practices there. And then our fantasy farming, we really talk about how trade is so important in the global aspects of having those connections with different people all around the world. So I just want to say thank you one more time for all of you for joining us today. I appreciate it. And happy National Ag Week. All right.